We can't hear. Somebody's on mute.
Thank you, Beth.
You're welcome.
So we need to mute all of the laptops in the room. This is our low-tech hack to our very high-tech courtroom, which will be great. But right now we're operating this as the microphone, and it's also a speaker. So you'll be able to hear the people on Zoom. They'll be able to hear anyone who comes up to the podium, and it's all being recorded. So we should have everything we need without all of the cameras and microphones that we normally have. Our first order of business is a public hearing. Madam Clerk, was the hearing noticed in the Journal News? Thank you. On the demapping and discontinuance of an unnecessary public road known to be known as the northern spur of Miller's Mill Road. We've received some additional information from the public on that and would like to move that we adjourn that public hearing to June 4th, 2024 at, I think we already have a public hearing at 6, so at 6:10.
Move to open it first and then make a motion to adjourn it.
Move to open the public hearing on the demapping.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I'd like to move that we adjourn it to our next town board meeting on June 4th at 6:10 p.m.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. We will hear more about that. And if anyone's interested in that matter, there are a lot of attachments about it. We now have a presentation and work session with the town board by the Land Preservation Task Force on a proposed community preservation plan. So if you turn off the volume. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. A little feedback here. Can everybody see the screen share that I have up of PowerPoint?
Yes.
Just glad we didn't do this meeting before the pandemic. Got our Zoom technology down.
Some of us do.
All of that. Will people be able to hear me?
It should come out.
Okay. So I should speak loudly. Speak loudly. Okay.
Can people on Zoom hear John when he speaks?
Yes, we can hear him. Thank you.
Okay, you can hear me and you can see the PowerPoint presentation. Good evening. My name is John Needham. I'm a member of the Open Space Committee for the town of Bedford. I'm here with some of my colleagues from our committee. We have been asked to evaluate the potential for the establishment of a community preservation fund for the town of Bedford. Tonight we have a short presentation and then we look forward to discussion and questions afterwards. So let me start, and there will be 4 of us from our committee who will be speaking tonight. We'll do so, we'll move it along. So this is our second appearance in front of the town board. We were last here on March 5th. I won't repeat the presentation that we made on March 5th, but I do think it would be useful to do just a 1-slide quick recap of the overall concept that we're here to talk about. So Bedford is permitted under New York state law to establish a community preservation fund. This is something that has been done by, I think, about a dozen towns in New York state so far, 6 of them in the Hudson Valley, the others out on the eastern end of Long Island. But basically, a community preservation fund allows a town to invest in lands that protect clean drinking water, open space, forested land, wildlife habitat, parks and recreation, historic places, and other assets, mostly environmental type assets, that the community considers to be valuable. The fund is financed by a one-time transfer tax paid by the buyers of property, buyers of real estate. And that tax has an exemption, and it has a discount to protect middle income and entry level buyers. Once you have the fund in place, it can be a very powerful tool for attracting federal, state, and even private foundation matching grants. It has a tremendous amount of value to the community, including, first and foremost, it is a program that protects Bedford's unique quality of life for residents of all ages, incomes, and backgrounds. It is good for health and wellness, and it also boosts property values. Okay, what about this tax? How does the tax work? First of all, the important thing to note, as I did in the last meeting, is that this is not a property tax that is borne by the residents of Bedford. This is instead a transfer tax on the sale of real estate, which has exemptions for, as I mentioned, for middle income and entry level buyers, which takes the form of an exemption and a discount. So I hope everybody can see the slide. It's in your paper version if you have the paper version, and if you have a screen open, you can see it. And I would call your attention to the lower left-hand side of the slide. And what you'll see there is the explanation for the exemption. The current exemption is $778,000. That happens to be the county, Westchester County median. And any sale that is made of real estate, that number, 778,000, is exempted from the tax entirely. From 778,000, if you look up a level, to 1 million, which happens to be Bedford's median, there is a highly discounted tax, 1/2 of 1 percentage point on any sales between 778 and 1 million. And again, this applies to all sales of real estate. So no matter how big the purchase, everybody who makes that purchase, the buyer, gets the benefit of both that exemption and that discount. The 2% tax begins at the $1 million level, and over $1 million, the tax is 2% on the amount that's over $1 million. So I realize that sounds a little bit complicated. Maybe the best way is to provide a couple of examples. If this tax is in effect, if you buy a $750,000 home, the tax on that sale paid by the buyer is a one-time zero. There is no tax for a $750,000 home. For an $850,000 home, the tax would be $360, a one-time payment, $360. For a $1 million sale, the tax would be $1,110. It is capped at that amount up to $1 million. For a $1.1 million home, the tax would be $3,110. That's because the 2% applies to the amount that's over $1 million. So that's the structure of the tax. Now let's talk about the program. The first thing to say about the program is that Bedford has a very long tradition of conservation efforts. It goes back hundreds of years. And this program is an extension, and it will extend and build upon the work that's been done in Bedford, including by the Open Space Committee, which has preserved places like the Buxton Gorge, located just a little less than a mile from the Bedford Hills train station, and many other similar kinds of projects. So now I'm going to pivot into our community preservation plan. This is something that is required under New York state law, that we have to create a community preservation plan. And I would also just note that this entire plan, which is quite lengthy, it's over 100 pages with a appendix of about the same length, is available on our website, which is bedfordcpf.com. And so you can go there anytime to get all kinds of information about this program, including this plan.
It's also
So I'm-
attached to the agenda.
Pardon me?
It's also attached to the agenda.
Which is attached to the agenda as well. Thank you, Mel. I'm about to hand it over to Lori Enzinger to take you through the highlights of the plan, but just by way of introduction, in framing this plan, we spent a lot of time thinking about and taking a look at Bedford's demographic profile, because it's very important that we take into account the current demographics of Bedford as a community. And of course, Bedford is an affluent community, but it's important to note that that affluence is not shared by everybody in the town. And in fact, according to the 2020 census, if you can believe it, 10% of people who live in Bedford live below the poverty line. The town has become increasingly diverse. More than 25% of the town today is non-white. And I could go on about this, but I think the important thing here is that this plan has to work for every resident of Bedford and all three of our hamlets. Second, the question of home ownership. Again, looking at census data, according to the last census, 76% of Bedford residents own their own residence. For almost all of you who own a residence, that residence is your most significant asset. And it's very important that this plan protect and improve property values. And then third, something that we don't think about enough, but we have more than 4,000 children who live in the town of Bedford today. It's about 25%, more than 25% of our population. And we need to make sure that this plan works for children under the age of 18. And just as importantly, and this continues a Bedford tradition, we need to do this for the next generation of people in Bedford. So that's the context. And with that, I'm going to ask Lori to come up. Lori is a member of our committee. She is an incredibly smart and dedicated person who has devoted a tremendous amount of time to this program. We are very lucky to have her as a volunteer, and she knows more about this plan than anybody else, so I'm just happy to invite her up to take you through the highlights.
Great, thank you, John. So I'm quickly going to go through the process and the methodology of what is called the Community Preservation Plan, CPP. As John said, the state's enabling legislation requires that the town create and approve a community preservation plan prior to the referendum going on the ballot. This plan is required to evaluate every single one of Bedford's 6,290 tax parcels to determine eligibility for future CPF investments by the town. The Community Preservation Fund Advisory Board, which we can talk about in the Q&A, and the town board will use this plan as a roadmap for future spending decisions. The plan was designed to be inclusive and broadly representative of the conservation goals that the town has prioritized over many years. So what is the methodology about? We call these goals preservation categories, and you see the 9 of them here. These categories were derived directly from the town's own comprehensive and open space plans that were developed over many decades of town planning and represent the most common themes found throughout those, and they were remarkably consistent. We then went even deeper and identified 19 different data sets for those of you who are wonky in the room. Those data sets were the ones that were most readily able to enable us to identify which parcels possess which criteria. Each of these 19 criteria were equally weighted, and each parcel was scored based on how many of the criteria were applicable to a particular parcel. A parcel must possess at least one of the criteria in order to be eligible. And a note on eligibility. Eligibility does not mean that the town is required to invest CPF monies in a particular parcel. It doesn't preclude the town from advocating for alternative uses for that parcel, nor does it restrict the rights of property owners to sell their property for any other use. It simply means that the parcel can be considered by the town for community preservation fund investment if there is a willing seller and if the town chooses to pursue negotiations with that seller for this purpose. So what were the highlights of the plan? And the plan again is online, and it's up and you can take a look at it. It's quite lengthy. As I said, the process has produced a broadly inclusive result. For example, as one of the 19 data sets, we included New York State defined environmental justice areas located in our denser hamlets of Bedford Hills and the southern parts of Potomac. Approximately 56% of town parcels received eligibility under the plan. Protection of drinking water, which polled as the #1 concern of our residents, is a key component of the plan, with nearly 40% of the eligible parcels receiving positive scoring for that factor. 40% of eligible parcels are potential additions to existing parks and preserves, could create potential new pocket parks, or could provide trail connections to increase residents' access to open space. Over 70% of eligible parcels received positive scores for contributing to the preservation of intact forests, healthy wetlands, or intact wildlife corridors, all of which are critical to stemming the ongoing loss of biodiversity and the ravages of climate change in our communities. 800 parcels have been identified as having a state or local historic designation. This plan will help the town augment its ongoing efforts to preserve historic places. And finally, a note on parcel size. While large parcels often possess the greatest concentration of conservation criteria, size alone is not a determinative factor. In fact, the size of eligible parcels ranges from a fraction of an acre to over 150 acres. The median size of eligible parcels is 2.6 acres. So in the end, this is a transparent process where the CPF Advisory Board and the Town Board, where CPF Advisory Board advises the Town Board on which parcels to consider for investment. It is the Town Board that will make the final decisions at the parcel level after full public engagement through the public hearing process. The Community Preservation Fund will provide a broad array of critical public benefits that accrue to every demographic and geographic corner of our community. These are the very community benefits that the town residents and town government have prioritized for decades. And this fund will ultimately enable us to do more and better conservation at a time when the urgency has never been greater. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. I just want to add one little postscript to Lori's presentation. I'd like to just provide 3 quick examples of the types of projects that the Community Preservation Fund is able to make investments into. Lori alluded to a pocket park. That's a term that not everybody may know, but the idea basically is to bring open space right into the neighborhoods, right to the hamlets. And it's a good example of the fact that this isn't necessarily about protecting large properties. They can be small properties that improve quality of life for people in neighborhoods. So that's important. The second example I won't go into because everybody's very familiar with open space efforts to protect things like a large woodland, a large forested piece of land that protects sources of drinking water like rivers, aquifers, those kinds of things. But that's very much in the sweet spot of this program. I think the third example is actually the most important, and I want to get it right. So rather than just kind of winging it, I'd like to read something about an example, because it comes from something that has been done, is in the process of being done in another New York town that has a community preservation fund. So this example is from Red Hook, New York, where the town partnered with nonprofit organizations to protect a 169-acre property. The town purchased the land outright, and a nonprofit acquired the development rights to 82 of those acres, consisting of prime farmland. Another 12 acres were set aside for affordable housing and will be purchased from the town by an affordable housing developer. Some of the remaining acreage will be used to enhance adjacent public parks and public water supply. The town's community preservation fund, among other sources, was used to make this project possible. And the reason I put the emphasis on that is that I think it's a great example that proves that this town does not need to choose between preservation and development. You don't need to choose between preservation efforts and affordable housing programs. This town can do both. This program does not compete with those kinds of efforts. It is synergistic with them, and other towns have proved that there's a very good pathway to making that happen. Okay, I'm going to just go slightly out of agenda here because I have detected that there might be a couple of real estate people here in the live audience, and which you probably can't see on the Zoom, but I think it's really important that we address the real estate dimensions of this program. And I would like to call upon a member of our committee who's on by Zoom. I hope we can activate him so that you'll be able to hear his voice. Dan Janelle is a member of our committee. Dan, maybe with the exception of the people in this room, has probably sold more real estate in Bedford than just about anybody over the last 50 years. He has looked very closely at this, and I'd love to just give Dan a chance to share his perspective. So is it possible to bring him
He
in?
should be able to talk.
Thank you, John. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Perfect. So, as a lifelong resident of Bedford, and obviously been involved in real estate for 50 years, to me it's so interesting that the new residents that will be funding this protection are the most enthusiastic about what makes Bedford so special. Many of them are relocating from areas that were not as forward-thinking as Bedford has always been. And I believe they will view this one-time fee really as an insurance policy about preserving what is why they came to Bedford. And I think they will be the ones who are contributing effectively, almost like an initiation fee to join a community, to really support and build upon what's the last few hundred years of all of this the citizens of Bedford have been working so hard on. And many of them are relocating from areas that have not been nearly as forward thinking as Bedford. So I think they will be pleased to be a participant in preserving really the reason they're coming here, and in many cases why they're leaving where they currently live. Some members of the Bedford real estate community have been dramatically saying things like this will hurt sales, this will be the last nail in the coffin. I can honestly say that Bedford real estate is extremely strong and extremely desirable, and I think a lot of that goes to committees like this, the town board, and so many that have worked so hard to really be thoughtful in terms of how the town gets developed. And I believe this is, when you look at what things are selling for, and there's so much interest in so many properties, that this is not even going to hit the radar in terms of from a cost point of view, but it's going to ring very loudly as to where they're moving and what the priorities of the town that they're moving to represent. And obviously the committee has been incredibly mindful not to burden those looking for affordable housing, our children moving to town and other people. The exemption is substantial. And I think for those who are buying significant properties, the fees will allow the town to create, as John said, small pocket parks, in many cases where they have the most impact, because they're the most residents living nearby, and obviously protect large properties and hugely important, the watersheds. The town of Bedford has many, many properties. The large majority are dependent upon wells, not on municipal water. Obviously, to bring municipal water to the town of Bedford would be hugely expensive, not practical. So the protection of the watershed is incredibly important, unlike areas south of here that are dependent upon municipal water supplies. And as John mentioned, the diversity of Bedford is a large part of what makes our town unique. While we have a lot of affordable homes around the hamlets, we also continue to attract clients that honestly could choose to live anywhere in the world, and they've chosen Bedford for all of the reasons that John outlined as to, why this fund is so important. It's not only open space, it's walking on the trails, the rivers, the lifestyle that Bedford has to offer. Really there aren't choices. They can't go next door and say, well, gee, I'm not going to pay the tax, I'm going to buy something. The commitment that Bedford has made to open space, dating back to the 20s when they put in zoning that really took care of the, protecting our community. So I just want to end by saying I'm wholeheartedly in favor. I know there's a lot of concern. I think I've spoken to some very good brokers in areas where this has been enacted, and many of the same concerns that have been raised by the Bedford real estate community, that this will impact value and desirability and people might go to a different community, have not been borne out. People are going to these towns for the very reason that the town has made a commitment to what they find attractive about the town. So I just want to thank this committee for the tireless work that they put in. I've just been lucky to be able to see how hard and well the town works to have things like this become part of the law. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. With your permission, I have one other very brief speaker. Would it be okay?
I'd really prefer to leave the advocacy to the public hearing and
Okay.
have this be a presentation of what the plan is, what it will do, what,
Okay.
The task force has found. I so appreciate your comments, Dan, but I know there are lots of people in this room that would like to also make comments,
Okay.
and that's
Fine.
not really
No problem.
what we're here
We'll wrap
for.
up very quickly then. Just to simply say that the timing for this is very important. I won't go through all the points on the slide, except one to say that in terms of our need, right now we have an open space fund that generates $496,000 this year. The price of an average acre of land in Bedford today, market value, $315,000. So we currently have an open space fund that has the wherewithal to buy almost 2 acres of land, but that's not enough. And so this program helps address what is really a funding shortfall. Anyway, I'm going to just motor through and just go to next steps. We're not here to ask anything specifically of the town board tonight, other than what we are driving toward is a referendum, which we hope will be on the ballot this November. It's an opportunity for the entire town to vote on this. And I can promise that the town will be given complete and full transparency. We will put this out there completely. Tonight is just the beginning. There'll be public hearings, as Ellen says. So with that, I'll just conclude our remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank the task force for all of the work that has gone into this. It has been, very thorough review of all the properties, of the categories, of the priorities, of clearly taking the temperature of a lot of the community. I think you did some polling and some work that informed this presentation. So really, thank you for all that you've put into it. There's been a lot of work behind it. So we appreciate all your volunteerism and help. Yeah. So I would like to go into sort of the Q&A part with the town board, if you don't mind. If town board colleagues have questions, concerns, clarifications, I'd love to talk more. I guess one thing that you said was that it boosts property values, and I'm wondering if you have sort of information in a comparable community that, supports that statement.
Yeah. So again, I would refer everybody to the new website that we've launched. There are lots of studies out there that show that proximity to open space and other kinds of amenities like parks and recreation have a very positive impact on real estate values. I really would love to ask one of our, in fact, I have somebody on the line here who could provide an example from one of the communities that have had this in place for a long time, if that would be.
Sure, it will answer questions.
Okay, so I'd like to invite Mike Sweeten to speak up. Hope he's unmuted.
Can you hear
So
me?
Mike is the longtime town supervisor of the town of Warwick, which I recognize is a different kind of town from Bedford in many ways. For 21 years, he is a highly respected, revered person who has overseen the time that they have had their community preservation fund. So Mike, the floor is yours to answer Ellen's
Yeah,
questions.
thank you to the supervisor and the board members. Thank you for listening. I know I've been there 21 years, so I know it's a lot. But I will just tell you that we enacted this in 2006. We were the first town outside of Long Island to do this. We had already taxed our own residents $9.5 million for the preservation, primarily of farmland at the time. But the Community Preservation Act went to our voters in a similar process that hopefully you will undertake. And our voters decided 55 to 44, so it wasn't overwhelming, but it was supported comfortably. We have seen home prices in Warwick over those years, year after year, exceed the median sale price of a home in Orange County. And I will tell you that Warwick is one of the most desirable communities, certainly in Orange County, perhaps in the Hudson Valley. And while we have maybe more farmland than you have in Bedford, I think we're a lot like Bedford in the sense of our commitment to solid zoning and things like that. So this was just a great tool. You will hear realtors, we did hear that, their concern and their legitimate concerns. But I think if you talk to a realtor in Warwick today, they will say that they support this Community Preservation Act and what it has done for our community.
Thank you. Has the bulk of your land protection been to preserve farmland as farmland, or has it been to provide parks and recreation, or to, protect scenic view sheds?
Well, so here's I'll give you the statistics. We did, again, because our bond referendum initially focused on farmland. That was our largest industry. We have preserved to date 38 working farms, over 5,000 acres. They all continue to be farmed. They all continue to pay taxes. But we have 3 villages in the town of Warwick. Greenwood Lake, which has no farms as part of our town, has a 9-mile bi-state lake. There was no public access to that lake unless you belong to a homeowners association until we bought a dilapidated marina and turned it into a beautiful access point to the lake for the public's use. That community never had a park, a center, a green. We bought a 16-acre parcel in the middle of their village that is now the focal point of all the activities in their village. We bought the William Henry Seward birthplace as a historic site. He was born in the village of Florida, if you don't know that. And we bought that and preserving that as a historic structure. And then we recently, just before I left, about 2 years before I left, we bought an 85-acre camp that was run by the UAJ. It was a retreat for kids from around the country to come. That model wasn't working for them. We saw a opportunity there. We bought an 85-acre camp that has 2 municipal pools, which we never had before, 6 pickleball courts that we created, a beautiful lake for fishing, hiking, access to the Appalachian Trail. And there isn't a day that our residents aren't in that park enjoying themselves. So the answer to you, long answer, I guess, is yes, we bought other things.
Thank you.
At the risk of embarrassing Mike, just want to note that when they saved that lake, the town tried to name the lake and the park around it after Mike, and he absolutely refused until he retired. and then they did it behind his back. So it's that place is now named after him, which I think is a great tribute to him.
Thank you.
I have a question. When you say that, I'm sorry, because of I'm gonna ask you. When you say Warwick is a comparable community, you have to.
Well, I would just say, I've been through Bedford. I was in the greenhouse business for 40 years. We had customers all over Westchester County. I've been in Bedford. I see that you do respect your environment, that you do protect your resources. And that is what Warwick has done over the years. We have an engaged constituency, residents who really understand why they're there. And they have built Warwick into the quality community that it is. And that's why they supported the Community Preservation Fund. And I will just echo, and I'm not advocating for anything, but I will echo the fact, because it is a fact, that people who have come into Warwick and paid that tax have come up to me as supervisor and said, hey, you're the guy that put that tax in place. And I say, yes. And they say, well, we get it. We understand it. That's why we're here. We want to be in this community. So that's, I guess, my answer to why I feel like, even though we have more
Okay.
farms.
I'm hearing your question.
So,
And I just
no, I didn't, I would like to finish the question.
Please.
So I totally agree with all of the goals of this. But when you're saying a comparable community, if you look at the median house price in Warwick, it's about $500,000, and the houses you can get there, you can get 3-4 bedrooms for like $500,000. And in Bedford, I mean, I paid less than that for a 3-bedroom house. Like, I mean, we're going so many, 20 something years ago. Now, if I come to Bedford with $500,000, I might be able to get a teeny tiny cape with 2 bedrooms on
Or not.
or not. So, but okay, so my point is that when you say a comparable community, what do you mean?
Okay. So I totally get the question, and I would just say 2 things in response to that. One is that this law is designed to let each community design it for the needs of their community. And that's very much baked into it. So this needs to be tailored to our town, and the law permits that. In terms of comparability on income, I'm not suggesting that Warwick and Bedford are identical communities at all. And I take the point that the price of real estate in Warwick is significantly lower than the price of real estate in Bedford. But if you look at some of the other towns, like take Southampton, New York, which is a community that has a much higher median sales price than we have here in Bedford, the program has been a huge success out there. And interestingly, they've also used the exemption. We're being much more aggressive about protecting to a higher level of sale, meaning we're protecting affordable and middle income markets. Their exemption in Southampton is $400,000. Ours is almost double that on the exemption, and then we got the discount on top of that. So we're really trying to address that question that you're raising.
But do you think there's a difference between a community where people are usually buying rentals and vacation homes versus a community where people are buying their primary residences? Because I would say that Bedford is, for the average home buyer, which I consider myself, I mean, this is my primary and only residence. But Southampton, I'm going to say from the research I did since the last time you gave a presentation in March, that's not really where people are going to have their primary residences. So I would say maybe the pricing is similar, but then you don't have those similarities that you say that Warwick does have, where you have, say, an 1.5-hour commute from New York City, and you have that desire to be environmentally sound and preserve the land. So is there a community that has a more apples to apples comparison with Bedford?
If I could just tag on to that, because I really feel like it's more about the characteristics of the buyer. speaking to what you
Yes,
just
yes,
said.
that's what I mean.
Right? It's
That's what
not
I'm
so much
getting
the
at. I'm sorry,
community, it's
yes.
really the characteristics of the
Yes,
buyer.
yes.
At the end of the day, like if I'm in the market for my second or third home on Southampton, the way I perceive any additional taxes or, cost is going to be very different, I suspect, than someone who's just looking for their one and only home, with the money that they scrimped and saved over, multiple years, for a down payment. So I do think that the characteristics of the buyer are really critical to this conversation.
Thank you. I think that's a much better way to.
Because the other end of that, if I could, because I have the floor, is like what happens? Like who are these buyers at the end of the day? Because I think we all, again, we want to preserve the space, the open space, the land, and all the things. But part of what we also want to do is preserve the character, right? And part of the character comes from people. I'm a little concerned that someone's going to come here, not worry about this extra tax that's on their purchase, consider it as Dan said, insurance, and then have expectations that, what they want is what the priority needs to be. And then what happens if and when it's not. So all of that.
So I can't speak to the ratio of permanent residents versus weekenders or vacationers. I think Southampton clearly has a lot of weekenders and vacationers. Bedford has some proportion of that as well. It's an analysis that would be worth doing to take a look. I think you can get it from a sense of the range of prices from assessor data. But I do think that there is an element to Bedford's population that comes here on weekends. I think that a lot of the income from this fund will probably come from that crowd. I shouldn't speculate on that. We should do the math to the best of our ability. We'll do that. And I also will make sure that we make efforts to take a look and try to identify comparable communities in terms of, to your satisfaction, that sort of prove, because every single town that has done this has become an advocate for it. I've become part of an association of representatives from towns that have a CPF. There's a lot of information sharing. It's amazing how much the people in these towns who have done this find it to be a valuable way to enhance the quality of life as well as the property values in the town.
So can I?
Yeah, sorry, Tom.
So John, you got me with the word math. As the engineer in the room, that was what I'm driving at here. So I have two different questions, two-part question. One is, when was your data gathered? Because I think you noted the medium parcel size was about 2.6 acres, and those are the individuals that would be most affected from that forward or above. A recent sale, which I'm privy to a lot of the sales, was a half an acre sale in the farms, $990,000 for a 1,640 square foot home. That's $600 to $610 a square foot. That is drastically different than what the medium parcel size at 2.6 being affected would be. So I question the numbers. Again, I love the intent of what we're doing here, like a lot of us on the board.
I think that's the parcel size in the plan for the parcels that could be protected.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought that was what would be affected by the tax.
No, that's
Okay.
Those are parcels that would be eligible for investment from the fund.
Oh, okay, understood. Sorry, I misunderstood.
And so the point is that the eligibility, that this isn't just all about big properties.
No, absolutely.
On average, it's 2.6 acres of properties that are eligible.
So then, taking that aside, when was the data gathered versus like the most recent sale, which I'm just noting here is almost $1 million for a half an acre property at 1,640 square foot. That's,
So
I worry about that.
we closely tracked the 135 sales that were made in Bedford in calendar year 2023. Median of 1,100,000. That median level has stayed pretty steady through the first quarter. April dipped a little bit, which was surprising. It can be affected by a small number of homes. In 2020, and there were 135 home sales or property sales in 2023. 2022, it was 167 sales at a median of 950,000. Actually, interesting, last year, 2023, was the first year in Bedford's history that the median sale price went over $1 million. But what we're really relying upon is a 3-year trailing average. So you take 2021, 2022, and 2023 to come up with the average. That's also the methods that's used for the Westchester County median calculation. So, and I know this is a lot of numbers. I'm happy to share this with you.
And then I have
put it on our website.
one last question. You said our revenue right now, or I call it your yearly revenue right now, is 497,000. Have you projected if this tax went into effect, what it would be, how much we would generate?
Yes.
Okay.
Again, that's based on a 3-year trailing average. And what we've done is we've taken into account the various levels of discount and exemption and how that plays out over time. So the 495 is actually the open space fund. And so based on that, the calculation that we see about 2 million in revenues coming in from this fund using the model that I put on screen earlier. So the 2% kicking in at $1 million, the discounted rate at 0.5% of 1% from 778 to $1 million. So we think based on that plan and based on historical averages, that should generate a little more than $2 million into this community preservation.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't see that.
How much administrative work is required? I know there was discussion of hiring an administrator. What's the role of that person and what's the expense that would be, and would it come out of this fund to pay that person?
Okay, so let me take that on 2 levels. First of all, there is the process of collecting the tax. And, you know, with 135 sales last year, we wanted to make sure that this wouldn't lay an administrative burden on the assessor or the comptroller for collecting those funds. And we've researched this pretty thoroughly. What we have discovered, and we have verified this with the other towns that have done this, is that the only role that the town of Bedford has in that is to be the receiver of the taxes, meaning all you do is receive the tax. You don't have to collect the tax as a town board or as a town. The tax is collected from the buyer at the time of sale by the closer and the title company or the title company. The funds are then transmitted to the Westchester County clerk, and then the funds are simply sent to Bedford. So Bedford's not involved, no administration for that. The 10% that you refer to is the provision in the Hudson Valley Community Preservation Act, which is the law that governs our CPF. And what that act stipulates is that the town may use up to 10% of the fund. So if it is $2 million next year, the town would be able to use 200,000 of that fund for the administration of the projects and programs that are taken on by the fund. And that also does not apply to the tax cap. So that is in effect incremental dollars to the towns to ensure that if help is needed for the administration of projects, whether that be, you know, help on the legal side for putting together the deals or administration of the properties themselves, that funding is available as a result of the fund.
So there's no administrative work on our end to confirm the right amount of taxes were collected or to certify that they were received or those kind of things on the sales.
That's my clear understanding based on having researched that in terms of tax collection, this will not be a burden for the town at all.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to acknowledge, this is Councilmember Andres Castillo. I just want to wave my hand to the folks on Zoom because I know I'm only using the microphone over there, but I think what I found to be really innovative about our proposal here is that it's a graduated tax rate, right? We acknowledge that we are in a very, relatively wealthy community compared to other municipalities in Westchester, compared to other municipalities that have adopted the CPF. And I think what we see is that big discrepancy even in the, one of the slides between the county median and the town median. And so I just want to emphasize that, right? We dropped it from 2% to 0.5%, which I thought was a very crucial step to protect the homes that fall below the 50th percentile. And I want to acknowledge to everyone in the room that if more compromise is needed, that is a potential avenue. We can continue to explore this graduated tax rate and look at homes that are, I will say on the record that I can understand why someone might have reservations about a home that just falls over the $1 million cutoff, right? So there is opportunity to revisit that tax rate should we feel that it's imperative to really think about minimizing the burden on the tax burden for buyers and any potential risks to sellers who are also concerned about that. So I just want to acknowledge where we have wiggle room, should that be a reservation that the public has. And that's all I want to say.
Thank
And-
you.
yeah.
I think that's a very good thing for us to look at. I mean, just given Tom's example, $1.1 million tiny little house, is very desirable in the farms, and perhaps I'm sure there was probably a bidding war for it, which is why it went so high. But I think it was $3,000 that you said would be the tax on that, and that is really like a starter home, so I would like to see a number maybe at our next meeting, or if you have the information, if we were willing to make it that 0.5% up to a higher amount, 1.25 maybe, or 1.5, and then understand how much revenue that could generate based on the 3-year trailing average. And I'm also curious if the last 3 years have been typical, or if that number is projected to be, different over the next few years.
Right,
The
and that,
exemption level or which number will be different, the Bedford.
Yeah, that median number,
Yeah.
because I guess that would just reduce the amount that we collect. If that number goes down, expecting it to go down, then, and we only collected 0.5% up to like 1.5, then we're going to collect dramatically less, which I would like to just consider if that's worth doing, at what point is it not worth doing?
I can respond, although I think. Bobby
right,
has
I
a
have
question.
something that kind of piggybacks onto that complicates it, and I haven't heard that mentioned yet. So one of the things that I've been thinking about is inflation rates have dropped. Interest rates then have risen. So if the interest rates are going up, house sales might actually go down in Bedford just as a matter of course, because people are just not going to buy as vigorously as they were before with COVID, with the lower interest rates. And, in addition to the whole idea of, are we going to be seeing lower median rates? How has the higher interest rate been taken into consideration with this? Because these numbers, I was also crunching the numbers like Tom, and I'm looking at it and I don't see the same numbers. Like that $2 million a year potential.
Well, so first of all, the answer to the question is as to whether the tax rates could be adjusted is yes. We've established that a graduated rate is legal under this law. We chose in this presentation that I made tonight to focus on protecting sales below $1 million. That has some logic to it based on the fact that $1 million is currently Bedford's median. But I think to your question, Ellen, of whether or not we could look at, can you extend a discounted rate up to a higher level of purchase? The answer is yes, we could look at that. And of course, one of the trade-offs on that is that it will result in less revenue into the fund and therefore less ability to kind of execute the goals of the fund in terms of protecting all the assets that we've talked about. So, yes, please, Lori.
So, Bobby, It's a great question. We actually took all of the sales that were provided to us by the assessor's office. So we looked at every single one of the sales in Bedford over the last 3 years. 21, 22, 23. 21, you could argue is anomalous, right? 22 less so, 23 maybe less so. I'd look to the audience to gauge whether or not, we're in an upward trend or not. But there's clearly a range, and we're using averages because we don't know where 24 and 25 are going to be. But the range would have been between 1.73 and 2.58 million into this fund if the tax had been in place in those previous 2 years. So that hopefully gets at your question about the range. Is it $2.0 million guaranteed every year? No, we have no way of forecasting that. Your question about interest rates, ask the Fed. And I spent 30 years on Wall Street, and I wouldn't even touch that question with a 10-foot pole. But we do our best to use the data that's at hand. This is real data. There were 500 and something sales that I analyzed personally. As John knows, there were many iterations to make sure we got this right. So that data we're very comfortable with. And we can test, as Andres knows, we can test whatever combination of marginal tax brackets you want to test to determine equity, fairness, and effectiveness. Because at some point, as Ellen said, it does not make sense to do this. And that's the balance that we're trying to strike between equity and effectiveness.
Thank you.
It's worth
Can
noting.
I
I'm
just,
sorry, please.
sorry, while you're up, there was a question raised about, private money being raised to protect the similar types of acquisitions. And I know you were at the Land Trust for a long time. Has that, is that a viable option? Is that something we should consider as a supplement to this? I mean, the Land Trust doesn't just serve Bedford, but is there, an opportunity for another group to be formed to, raise this amount of money or, similar to protect, for parks and land and.
So it's a fair question. Private funding is available, but not to the extent and not at the same timetable we have found as aligns with willing sellers. So the critical point about this program is you're building a pool of funds to give the town flexibility and nimbleness to be ready to pull the trigger when there's a willing seller. Remember, this is a voluntary program. This is not, I don't want to use that word. It's a willing seller program. So you only have a transaction when there's a willing seller and a willing buyer. If you have the funds in your tool chest to then leverage with private foundation money, as you know, Ellen and the rest of the board, the project that we're working on Rayburn Road, the leverage there of town money is 5 to 1. So the town is leveraging its dollars. It's getting 5 times the impact of its own dollar because of, in this case, state funding. But I have no doubt that we can partner with Hyannis River Gorge, with Westchester Land Trust, with other private organizations in the community who do this day in and day out. But none of them can shoulder the burden of this program alone. The funding just doesn't operate that way. The private funding. Thank you.
And one of the real virtues of this program is it does not compete with those nonprofits. Those nonprofits are all working very hard to raise the money they need. Private dollars, philanthropic dollars are always going to be a part of the land conservation equation here in Bedford, including with like the example I read. They're going to be partnerships, and that's one of the great things about this program is it's very flexible about partnering up nonprofit organizations, individual philanthropists, and this fund to be able to acquire things that would be out of the reach of any one of those individually. But I would suggest, having been on boards and sitting on a board that does a lot of fundraising, we don't need yet another nonprofit out there hammering the public for donations. We've kind of saturated that. I think the nonprofits we have are already struggling with the kind of competition that's out there. So this is a great supplement to that, and it'll boost their work. It'll supplement them.
So John, I have a quick question. One of the things I've learned on being on the board for 2 years is that municipal projects thrive, and relatively most of the time they're dependent on federal and state funding. And you talked about grants briefly in the slides, but can you shine some light on or give us some information on what kind of grants are out there, quantities? If we have the funds and and are available to us, give or take 2 million, what can we see with a percentage or to the types that are out there? And I have to do my education, but a start would be helpful.
So Tom, so I was the executive director of the Westchester Land Trust for almost 10 years and on the board for 10 prior to that. So the grants that are available at the state level are probably the ones that are most fruitful for this matching this type of program. Federal grants, while available, are A, harder to get, B, they tend to focus on different types of properties. There's kind of that big ranches,
Gotcha.
big open, broad open spaces. Not to say it's impossible. But, so we're typically looking at state monies, sometimes Westchester County match, and sometimes private foundation match. At the state level, we found the most effective program is coming out of DEC. And it's coming through the WQIP program, which you're all familiar with because you access the WQIP through the MS4 program, et cetera. But there's a land acquisition subcomponent of the WQIP, which is funding the Rayburn Road acquisition, which I said it's a $1.6 million project, and the town is putting up about $300,000.
Okay.
So that's pretty good leverage.
That's a data point.
It's a very successful program. The way that you access that money is either through a nonprofit partner. In this case, the town reached out to WLT to be the applicant, but WLT is turning the land over to the town immediately. Or you can apply yourself, but I understand that sometimes there are timing reasons why you wouldn't want to do that. There are also funds available through the New York State Ag and Markets Program, which obviously are limited to agricultural properties, which could be accessed to purchase development rights. One thing to keep in mind is not every property interest that the town can acquire is the property. You can acquire a trail easement, you can acquire a facade easement, you can acquire the building rights. So in that case, the property stays on the tax rolls. You don't own it, so you have no management obligations or limited. If there's a trail easement, the town would manage the trail. But for conservation easement purchases, the homeowner still lives there, still owns it, still manages, still pays the taxes. So the program spans a wide array of types of acquisitions, and there are different funding pools that are applicable. But I'm pretty confident that the leverage is high.
And last question, being awarded a grant, I'm learning, it predicated on competition. How many, you said there's 12 other towns in this state that have the same, so would it be just us against the other 12 and that's it? To be awarded the grant?
Oh, no.
Also grants.
Yeah, for grants.
Totally different aspects. So
Okay.
every community is always able to access whatever funding is coming out of the state.
Okay.
So we can never assess whether or not you're always competing with somebody.
Right. So what's the competition like?
My experience has been that Westchester County, and Ellen, you would correct me on what you directly applied for, but at the Land Trust, we have, Jen is still here. I don't think I want to say this, I'll jinx it. We have never not gotten a grant that we applied for on behalf of the municipality.
I'm sorry, can you speak?
We have never not received a grant that we've applied, WLT has applied for on behalf of the municipality. We've partnered with municipalities throughout Westchester as the applicant, and we've been successful. And I suspect, this is me saying this, the state is very aware of diversifying the distribution of funding through all of its grant pools. And Westchester is very unique in terms of the open space character. I mean, Bobby, you said it, we are not Warwick. I don't think we're pretending to be Warwick. The types of properties that we protected, as Mike said, it was largely at the outset farmland.
Right.
We could do some farmland, but it's not, I don't think, going to be our focus. The types of properties that we protect are quite different, and the state recognizes that, and the state recognizes that through diversifying the way grants are, diversifying the recipients of grants.
Thank you.
Laura, while you're up there, sorry, could you give us a sense on Westchester Land Trust district tenure there?
Yeah. Can we just finish up the town board and then I'll open up to questions to the community? I'm sorry, we just want to make sure everyone has their questions.
So I have one more question. One aspect that I really liked about this was that you can dedicate the land for preservation or for housing and development. And we have so many competing interests, which we see now that we're trying to reestablish a new comprehensive plan. We have making the town more walkable and preserving land and, you know, not only making affordable housing, but housing altogether. Now, my question is, without having the new comprehensive plan in place, how can we know if we approve this, what that's going to look like? Like how can we give any direction on this?
So the short answer is you don't have to make a decision about the parcels until you're ready to make a decision about the parcels. The next step is to get the referendum on the ballot. I'm skipping ahead of you, sorry. Get the referendum on the ballot, assuming the voters approve it, and we would like to suggest that let the voters decide. The voters decide yes, the tax becomes effective sometime in the first quarter of 2025. And the fund begins to accrue funding. You don't have to buy your first property interest until you're ready to. So if you say as a board, we want to wait until we have this final comprehensive plan in place to help inform other uses of parcels, then you're free to do that. All the CPP does, Bobby, and we were required by law to present it to you at this juncture. It gives you a tool and it gives you a roadmap. It doesn't give you a mandate that these parcels are only allowed to be used for this purpose. You can say, you know what, that's fine, but we're going to allocate other funding. So CPF funding cannot be used for development. I just want to be clear on that. The mixed use example that John used was partnering with other organizations or using other pools of town money to create a consortium. So if you found a 10-acre parcel that you wanted to put 5 acres into development and 5 acres into a pocket park, you could do that, but you'd have to carve out the funding. The state is legislation is very specific about what we can do with CPF dollars.
Right.
And I know dollars are fungible and it gets a little bit silly, but you need to demonstrate that you're not using CPF funding for development.
Okay.
Yeah, and the other piece of that is, and I think it's implicit in what Lori said, but every single investment that's made by this fund has to be approved by the town board, which will receive advice from the advisory board. And it will be subject to public hearings. The public will have a chance to weigh in on individual acquisitions, every single one of them. And if you are juggling multiple priorities, you'll be able to decide where to go on whatever parcel is being considered.
And at what point would we appoint the advisory board, and is there a set term or tenure for that board?
Yes. Lori knows the answer. It's a five or 7 person new board, which you will need to vote upon before the referendum, actually before the filing of the referendum. So that'll need to be decided this June.
Staggered board. So the legislation defines how to stagger it. And I couldn't recite that to you, but effectively, if you have a 5-person board, the term is 5 years. If you have a 7-person board, the term is 7 years, but they stagger it. So you're always having at least one person rolling off. And then there was a second part of your question. Yes, so the composition of the board has to be town residents. And to the extent, and they cannot be members of the elected body. They have to be volunteers, not compensated. The town has to demonstrate that it attempted to seat a farmer on the board, or if there's an ag district in the municipality, which in this case there is, you tried and attempted to seat a resident member of the ag board. So the broad representation of agriculture being a goal there. If you can't find one who's suited, then don't do it, but must be town residents otherwise.
Otherwise, there's no criteria, it's just, we try to find a farmer and
they have to
other
be,
people.
They have to be experienced in land conservation, so the land trust community is a source of who you probably draw from, as well as historic places. So I would imagine that people in the community who are involved with historic preservation would also make for great.
And this is an advisory board. Now work with the plan, as Lori indicated. The idea behind the plan is to create flexibility for the future decisions made. No way to know that a property in the middle of Bedford Hills may come on the market and suddenly be a target. We want to provide flexibility to the board and to the town to be able to move on a property that makes sense. And that could be 5 years from now. So that's why, I think 56% of Bedford's parcels, we've got 6,600 and 90 parcels, and more than 56% of them could be candidates for this. So it's very flexible.
Okay. And then the advisory board would make a recommendation, then there would have to be public input, and then the town board would ultimately decide that.
Very similar
Okay.
process to how your open space committee works.
Exactly, right, right. And they've worked off of sort of a list of coveted properties, but this is much broader than what I think they've generally analyzed properties for. There's
That's
more
right. The
opportunity.
criteria are much broader.
Mhm. Okay. Any other questions or comments from the town board before once we start, Scott, I'm sure I have to
No, it's
ask
not.
everyone. So, but you're welcome to ask. I would ask that, members of the public speak up so you can be heard on Zoom, and also try to ask questions, not just make statements. We will have a public hearing for, sort of editorial and statements, if we set a public hearing at our next meeting. We're not setting a public hearing at this time. We don't have a draft law to review or anything. We're just talking about this plan, getting questions, getting as much information as we can. We'll be putting information out to the community, and then at our next meeting, we would consider whether we would want to set a hearing on a draft law that's presented to us for the following meeting. So, go ahead.
This is for Lori, just for Westchester Land Trust. There was a reference to supplementing the conservation fund. I think it's already spoke with the $500,000 we currently have per annum.
The open space
Open
fund.
space, sorry. So how much in Westchester Land Trust per years could they raise in private donations and charity functions
For general ops or for land acquisition?
in total?
It's two really different questions. For general ops, the budget is close to 2 million a year, but that's to pay the staff and pay the utility.
Okay.
Land acquisition is separate, and they don't fundraise separately for land acquisition unless there's a project. So this is what I was alluding to earlier, that the timing is really tricky. What we found in Westchester, most people are interested only in funding land acquisition, fundraising, properties that are in their backyard. Someone in Bedford doesn't care about Peekskill, and someone in Yonkers doesn't care about Mount Vernon. So when we raise money for a specific land acquisition, we are targeting individuals who we think
Right.
care most about it. And
Right.
some projects are successful, Scott, and some fail.
I respect that. I just wanted to get a sense on whether private funding can happen for our locale versus a tax-based issue. And so I just want to think, I mean, it's great marketing. I commend your marketing team. It's like on every page, every slide, it's clean water, clean water, clean water. I get it. Who would vote against clean water? I'm gonna be an idiot to vote against clean water. Having said that, it's not about clean water, because if it was about clean water, we'd be standing here going to the board and saying you should eliminate all pesticides and fertilizers used on all the verdant lawns throughout Bedford. I would be making that protest. So one could argue clean water is part of it, watershed's part of it, but there are other ways to certainly go after that and pitch it. It was at the train station, it's here. I get it. No one would vote against clean water. I get it. But a 2% tax, I also noticed we stopped at $1.1 million. What about the houses at 2 million? 2.5, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 on top of mortgage reporting tax, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000. The mansion tax, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000. And suddenly we have these numbers, which we have the farms as $1 million purchase. A house at 1.4 went for 2.1. No one wants to pay 2.1, but no one wants to pay $100,000 in additional taxes. It's easy to tax, especially if it's on the books. But having said that, the tax has been on the books since, well, I think Warwick referenced 2006. So in the 18 years, is not a single town in Westchester has applied the tax?
I don't know if any have applied. First of all, thank you for the questions, and just a couple of, may I respond? Is that
Sure.
the format? Okay.
Yep.
So first of all, this program requires a lot of work. And it is a major undertaking, and we've put together a volunteer team that's taking that
I'm
on.
not knocking your.
No, I know. I'm just
John,
speaking to the
can you
question.
move forward so everyone online can see?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
I'm just speaking to the question of why have no other towns done this in Westchester County? And I actually take a lot of pride in the idea that Bedford can be a leader, be the first town in Westchester County to do it. The popularity of this program continues to rise with every town that does it. The referendum numbers reflect that. It is a lot of work to take it on. And I think that's the reason why other towns have not yet done it, but I think you'll see other towns doing it. To your question about clean water, and I'm very glad you brought that up. That is a huge issue for us. We recently saw the news that Pound Ridge is dealing with a contaminated aquifer and well situation. Once you have that problem, it's hugely expensive to address it. And you need a holistic solution that includes all the various tools that are at your disposal to protect drinking water. And I don't pretend to be an expert on this topic, but I do know that the best way to protect water quality is to prevent stuff from getting into the water in the beginning. Here in Bedford, the great majority of us rely upon wells and aquifers to supply our water. And if you can protect the buffer lands around those aquifers, and not just with wetlands regulations, that's one of the ways that does it, but you've got to do more than that. And it's a hugely important issue. And it's very much at the center. And you'll see this if you read the plan in depth. There is a lot of attention paid to waters that are, to lands that are adjacent to rivers, streams, aquifers, reservoirs, all of the sources that all of us rely upon to be able to turn on our tap in the kitchen and get a drinkable glass of water. It's very much a part of this.
I have no doubt it's a part of it, but pesticides and fertilizers will be more to the well
You
system.
you need to regulate that too. I mean, but you can't just pick one of those solutions. You've got to do it all. If you consider that to be an important issue. I think most people do.
Any other comments, questions? Let's try to keep it to questions. Yes.
John, question for you. Appreciate all your efforts, hard work here. What do you tell a buyer who's new to the area, who's looking at North Castle, Newcastle, Lewisboro, North Salem, Pound Ridge, at $2 million to spend? How do you justify an additional $20,000 on top of the $36,000 you're paying and a mortgage reporting tax and a management tax, on top of the plus 2% they're going to be paying starting in August with the NAR settlement, which will require buyers to pay the buyer's broker? How do you talk that buyer to staying in Bedford versus Pound Ridge, Lewisboro, North Salem? What will that do to property values in Bedford? What will it do to the tax basis overall after 3, 4, 5 years? If people are going to other towns, if I'm a buyer and I can get the exact same house, the exact same property in Pound Ridge or Lewisboro, I'm doing that. What do you say to that buyer?
Yeah. Would it be okay if I let Dan Janelle answer that question?
No.
It may be a rhetorical question.
Initiation of being part of our community, it comes across as elitist. We're having folks come in, paying 60 grand and a $3 million parcel. They're gonna have different expectations of what it looks like to be a Bedford. If they're paying that kind of money, they're gonna have certain expectations going forward. That's a different community member than $999,000 buyer. Is that view to welcome to the community? An elitist initiation, tax like a country club. That's not what Bedford's all about, in my opinion. But sorry, okay, let's answer the question.
Okay, well, I'll just admit frankly that you have a lot more expertise on real estate than I do. And that's why we have a real estate person on our committee. And I'm not sure why you wouldn't want to hear his response to it, because he's been doing it for 50 years and he knows, well, I don't know if he can even hear the question. Exactly. So everybody except me. So
I'll answer that as a new Bedford resident. So I've lived in multiple communities. I've lived in Westchester my whole life, only in Bedford for the last year and a half, as you know. I chose Bedford over Richfield, over Chappaqua, over North Castle, over Pound Ridge, Lewisboro, etc. I had opportunities, as you know, in every one of those communities. I chose Bedford for a reason, because what is here needs to be protected. And what I see is not necessarily protected, but I know Bedford is progressive and is willing to take that progressive step to protect what I see. It's an investment. I would use a different phrase than initiation fee. I would say it's an investment in our future, and it's an investment in our health and our well-being and the health and well-being of our kids. The planet is on fire. If you want to just talk about health and safety, my property floods, as you know. So there are ways to, if we were having this conversation to invest $50 million in a stormwater treatment plant, because people's homes were flooding and roads were flooding, I don't know that we'd have as much controversy as saying, let's invest $2 to $5 million in natural green infrastructure that provides very similar benefits to the community as bricks and mortar. So for me, I could have been that buyer, and I would be willing to pay that tax of $2 million, $3 million, whatever it is. And the tax is designed to be progressive. We acknowledge that. Andres was very eloquent in describing how we arrived at this. It is a balancing act. We get that. But we're trying to balance the need to invest in the preservation of natural resources that benefit every corner of this community, with the economic reality that Scott brings up and you bring up. We get it. It's a balance. It's not-
Lori, I might suggest that you're probably not the typical Bedford buyer who's buying a $1.65 million house and is trying to educate 3 children and live their life as their primary goal.
Ellen, you
Right.
don't have people
There's
say
so
their
many
names
different
because it's gonna be difficult.
things that go into our buyer pool, and those are the people that we want. We want to encourage people who are buying $1.2 million houses, $1.4 million houses. They have to raise their family, they have to educate their kids. There's so many different pressures and things that they're looking at. So I think that's a little bit of a.
Well, okay, you know far more about real estate. And by the way, thank you for participating in this process. We need this kind of dialogue. We bought a house in Bedford last month. We raised 3 daughters here. There were a lot of, and we were doubling down. We've been here for 33 years, but we decided, we're not leaving, we're staying here, and we bought a new house. In our case, we were living in a house that was very old. That is very old. It's built in 1790. We wanted something newer. So we bought something that was built in 1820. And it's a great fit for what we're interested in. But for us, the decision about being here had everything to do with the kind of qualities that this program is about. And when we looked at the pros and cons of buying a house in Bedford versus buying anywhere else, I can tell you that the closing costs that this falls in the category of, they weren't on the list. They weren't on the list. I'm not saying it's not an issue, but it is not a driving issue when it comes to the demand for Bedford real estate.
And I think
It's not
this is
gonna
a-
crater the demand for Bedford.
Right, I think this is a point that everyone's going to agree to disagree. I don't think that we can really go back and make the arguments right now as to how to get around this. Some people will, have a bidding war for a house, other people will walk away with a fee. And, I'm not sure where we're going to come out on this if we have a long conversation about it, but I'm happy to receive email comments about that. But I think we should move on to the next question. Would you just state your name for the record, please?
I can't hear you.
Myra Green.
What my question is regarding the taxes. You're stating that this is really a buyer's tax. But indirectly, once the town purchases land, comes off the tax rolls, somebody has to absorb it. And that absorption comes and falls on the homeowners. So indirectly, it comes back to that. And that's a concern in terms, because Bedford taxes, particularly Katona taxes, are extraordinarily high. So you're talking about buying all these parcels at whatever time, and it comes off the tax rolls. It's got to be absorbed. And that's a concern that people need to know. The other question I have is for you. My question is getting this information, if you approve this, if the town board approves this, and we no longer have the Bedford Review, how in fact are you going to get this information out to all the homeowners in terms of what exactly you're planning to vote for? Now, I've done a little bit of research. It is my understanding after questions that obviously, since we no longer have the Bedford Review, that it would be posted on your weekly newsletter. Well, there's a question here. And what I found out is that basically, in terms of the subscribers to the newsletter, maybe perhaps it's 6,000 people that you're reaching. However, the voter population in the town of Bedford is, I'm just looking at my records here, 12,855. That's almost 50% of the population. How are you going to reach them?
Well, I think if there is a ballot initiative on the if there's a referendum on the ballot, usually the League of Women Voters put out information on what's on the ballot. There is information, I think,
never
that
get a letter
this
from
group would do. We have set up a page on, well, I don't know if we've set it up yet, but there's a page that community members could come to the town website with all of the information that's been presented. There is a new nonprofit paper forming that should be out by then, which would also reach all of the residents of town. So that hopefully would report on this and provide lots of information on it. There could be more public forums and hearings, and we could do a mailing. So there's a lot of opportunities to reach people. How many parcels are in the town of Bedford? How many?
6,690.
6,690. So a lot of those people live in the same houses and maybe get the
I'm just
information.
talking about what was on voter registration.
Right.
People that vote in town.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people, and your newsletter only reaches half. And who even knows if that's, we can do.
Right. No, and everyone doesn't open it, obviously.
I beg your pardon?
Everyone doesn't open it who's on our list. Yeah.
So it's important to get that information out.
Yes, in many ways.
On a ballot. you can
Certainly.
Explain exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, right. No, you're right. There would have to be a lot of education if this was to go to the ballot for the voters. And it would have to be worded, I think we would have to review very carefully how it's worded. So it's, as clear as it can be what it is. In the back?
Thanks. My name is Harding Mason. I have a question for the presenter. Did you describe how the properties were going to be maintained? Who was going to pay for the maintenance of any parcel of pocket parks? And all that?
Well, I mentioned before, there's a provision in the law which allows 10% of the fund to be allocated to the ongoing maintenance of those projects. So money from the fund can be used to handle that, those tasks.
And that would have to be administered by the town. Right on that.
Well, it depends on what it is.
If you create parks, for example, where the public's going to be involved and on and off that property, there'll have to be insurance, there'll have to be landscaping, and there'll have to be all those costs involved. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I believe the answer is that Parks and Recreation for the town would need to maintain the parks once they've been preserved by the.
No, there's definitely a cost element that could even exceed the money coming in any possible year, depending on how many parcels. And I just want to bring that up because I think we've glossed over that. And
John.
I don't think the town was responding to that. Made it sound like the town had nothing to do, take the money in and that's
right.
Well, I asked about the administration and I was told the 10%. So would the 10% a year could it be earmarked year after year after year so that if it built up over 10 years and we had $20 million to spend, would 10% of that full amount be available for the administration of, we bought a horse farm and then wanted to open a horse camp and wanted to run it with that fee, would that be available? Would it be that amount?
Well, I guess I would just say that the legislation is very specific on this point, and rather than kind of quoting it off the top of my head, I'd rather research that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
just to go on very quickly. Obviously, there's going to be a major concern about how does this really affect
taxes in the town over the long run? And is this program, has it got a sunset date, 5 years, 10 years? Or is this an ongoing thing? Because I see that town taxes usually go up over time. And as the town tax goes up and this tax is there as well, I see it be a negative influence in buyers coming to the town. There's no question that Bedford's a beautiful town, and the people that come here, they do make that choice. And I don't know that the town is in financial trouble, that we need to depend on this new tax in order to keep Bedford beautiful and looking to the future with water preservation and all those things. But I think taxes are a big issue. And it was brought up before, that tax at the closing is not a small deal. It's a big deal. And if I had more time, draw in more information from around New York State, you would probably find that the majority of this kind of transfer tax was ultimately proven to be not a good thing for the town. And I'd like to see at some presentation in the future, a real tax assessment and a number of different third-party views coming in for the public to hear, not it to be an argument between Realtor A and Realtor B.
Thank you. John, would the tax be able to be raised from this, would it
Taxes
go?
is limited by this law to 2% maximum. If we set it at a lower amount, it would require a referendum, another referendum to change it.
You can't, whatever is set in this referendum couldn't be changed by the town board. It would have to go to the voters again. To change it, it would have to go to a referendum.
Are you talking about the graduated levels or just the 2% top level?
If you come back to us at the next meeting and say, here's what we propose, that you pass a local law to put something on the ballot that is, taxing from 778 to 1.25 million at 0.5%, and then everything above that at 2%, or at 1.5%. We don't go all the way up to 2%. Would we be able to change it so that it goes up to 2% at a future date just by vote of the town board, or that would require a whole nother process?
Require voter approval to change the tax rate, including the graduate.
So it couldn't just inch up over time.
The exemption is designed to, to change over time and based on that 3-year trailing average, so that
the base amount, the exempted
the
amount.
amount of exemption from the tax will rise with the median sale price for Westchester County, rise or fall with that. So that changes, but the percentages that are applied to the sale would stay where they are, unless you had another reference.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Karen. Can you state your name?
My name is Karen Ferris. And you mentioned earlier that it would be an advisory committee that would make recommendations on what properties would be recommended. So what happens if one of those board members happens to be a very large landowner? So let's just say that they have a lot of land around their house. And is there any, how do you protect against that board member saying, well, this is a great deal for me, because I get to save a lot of taxes. So how's that?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it is an advisory board, and it's up to the town board to make all of the final decisions. So if you have a conflict of interest within the advisory board, I think the proper thing would be for that board member to recuse themselves from consideration of something where they have conflict. And if for whatever reason it didn't feel like the right thing, that would be in the judgment of the town board to say, we're making our own decision. We appreciate the input from the advisory board, but it's an advisory.
We have a pretty strict code of ethics that our committee members are expected to read and follow and sign off on, and that would be a conflict, I think, of interest that we wouldn't allow.
Actually benefit the board member, they are prohibited from being directly involved.
And also a committee member, not just the board members.
No, committee members also
Committee
are
members as well.
required to follow the code of ethics. I'm just curious about back to the plan. As we were talking about some of the things that could go into it, I would like to see climate resilience in here if that's something that we could consider, whereas, water tables are getting higher and higher, lots more flooding, like if that was something that could be addressed by a fund that could purchase land. And our comprehensive plan has a lot of information about, it should have a lot of information about climate resilience. So if that could be something. And then also in terms of who gets appointed to the committee, the advisory committee, having someone who knows about, not just conservation, but also sort of climate resiliency, and also perhaps some people who have been on our comprehensive plan advisory committee. I don't know if that qualifies them with conservation, but they'll have been part of this whole process of understanding what our community's needs and wants are, and able to clearly articulate sort of what the drivers are for what people want, and engaging the community around, making those decisions. Because just open space and conservation people may not think the same way as someone who's been involved in depth in all of the aspects of the comprehensive plan.
Good. Can I
Okay.
just ask one more question?
Yes, Myra.
This question was addressed when we had the brokers meeting with you. And I think, what's her name was there? I can't remember. Anyway, they couldn't answer the question. And the question being, when we talk about sales, buyers, are we including land sales, commercial, and condos? It couldn't be answered at that meeting, and I'm wondering, are those now included in this?
All property all property sales.
Commercial,
homes,
land, and
real
condos?
estate.
All
Great.
Okay, so I think we're gonna wrap it up. We will hear more about the potential proposed local laws at our next meeting. And if the town board wants to move forward with adopting any of those local laws, we will set a public hearing to hear more on that. And then if that, public hearing, goes forward and the town board chooses to adopt any of those local laws, that would then trigger it being on the ballot. So there's a lot more time and process involved. So we, fully expect everyone will have an opportunity to submit comments to the town board. Feel free to send emails now, but there will be another window of time where we're collecting all of those and putting them in one place. And we will get all of the information that we've received up on the town website, as well as, this presentation and the original presentation and resolution that sort of kicked off this process to do all of this work. So thank you very much, John and Lori. Appreciate your being here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Sorry it's so hot. We'll be back in the other room for our next meeting with high tech and air conditioning. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, we will move to our consent agenda. If everyone could please keep we have to continue with our meeting, so if you could keep your voices down. Thank you. We are going to move on to our consent agenda. Request by the Finance Office to accept the abstract of claims and paid priors.
Yes, please. Thank you. These are the minutes of our meeting on Zoom.
Oh, on Zoom.
Exactly. We've been using those as our formal minutes. Thank you.
Okay, for the consent agenda, number 1, request by the Finance Office to accept the abstract of claims and paid prior in the amounts of. Yes.
just for the minute. I'm sorry. See?
Yes, $9,474,561.61. Acceptance of the monthly reports. Number 3, request from the Director of Personnel to approve the probationary appointment of Amanda Farina to the position of Recreation Supervisor effective May 22nd, 2024. Number 4, request from the Director of Personnel to approve the appointment of James Rosaport to Assistant Water Maintenance Foreman with an annual salary of $94,765.72 effective May 31st, 2024. Number 5, a request from DPW Commissioner Wynn to approve auctioning 3 Ford Escapes for sale. Which are pretty much scrap cars after. Okay. Number 6, request from the town clerk to approve a block party event on June 2nd for residents of North Street and Katona with anticipated attendance of 30 people commencing at 4 p.m. Number 7, a request from Recreation and Parks Assistant Superintendent for the town board to approve the intermunicipal agreement between the town of Bedford and the county of Westchester for positive youth development, summer employment camp, in which the town of Bedford will be reimbursed $5,000 from Westchester County for our summer employment camp by entering this agreement. Number 8, a resolution approving stormwater declaration and easement agreement for the Bedford Union Cemetery. Number 9, request to consider a resolution approving stormwater management and facilities declaration and easement agreement for 60 Black Brook Road, Bedford, New York. And 8, 9. Number 10, request by DPW Commissioner Wynn to award highway materials and services. Do we have a motion to approve these 10 items on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those resolutions and motions carried. Under new business, we have a request from DPW Commissioner Wynn to approve a proposal from Woodard and Curran for design and bidding services for the Bedford Village Sewer District. And the request is to allocate $100,000 from ARPA funds. So this is related to the fact that the Bedford Village Sewer did not receive the grant funding that we applied for last year. So we are doing it again. And we have a proposal coming up that includes another grant request. But Commissioner Wynn is here. Kevin, if you want to give us the details of this and this request.
Good evening, everyone.
Good
The
evening.
project, just to summarize the project, it is to partner with the Bedford Central School District to provide sewer service to the Bedford Elementary School, as well as the neighborhood business district of the Bedford Village Hamlet. The school district has a wastewater plant that is failing and needs to be replaced, and it's an opportunity for both the town and the district, as well as the property owners in the business district, to benefit from the environmental benefits as well as flexibility of having a sewer system rather than septics. So we created a sewer district last year by referendum. As Supervisor Calvez mentioned, unfortunately, we were unsuccessful in grant applications, but did get feedback from the agencies as well as feedback from the regulators that they're willing to give us another shot at grants. So the request this evening is to allow Woodard and Curran to move forward with design of the wastewater facility so that we're at a better level of readiness and likely score better in the grant process. Woodard and Curran's proposal is attached, and it addresses various phases of design, going from the collection system, as well as the wastewater plant design and surveying and geotechnical work associated with both. We thought that given the desire to move the project forward, it made sense to deal with the wastewater plant and regulatory aspect of it as being the most time-consuming and complicated aspects of the project. So we recommend that Woodard and Curran be authorized to move forward with regulatory approval for a speedies permit, and then initial design of the wastewater treatment facility. And that's what is before you this evening.
Thank you. Are there questions from the board?
The one question I had, Ellen, was, and Kevin, I pretty much answered it, was did we get feedback? Do we know exactly why we didn't receive the grant last year? And are we targeting those specific aspects? But you had said that's exactly what we're doing, correct?
Correct. And the general feedback was that it is a good project and the grant applications were thorough. Both grants that we applied for are extremely competitive. EFC, which is the entity that the next agenda item will be addressing as far as reapplying for a grant, indicated that additional readiness would be beneficial. So that's what this item is about.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have not expended all of our ARPA funds with the understanding that we have this, big infrastructure project that may benefit from some of those funds. However, we're kind of balancing how much, we want to put towards it, and whether, we're going to get the grants or not. So I think this is a good amount to put forward for improving our application as best we can. And if at any point, we get an indication that we aren't going to get the grants, we can stop spending money. But I think this is a wise investment in some of the preliminary work to make the best case, put our best case forward. And I have to say, I was at the Bedford Historical Society annual meeting, presenting along with our planning director, Jessica Youngblood, and several other people on the panel. And the Bedford sewer was like the topic. Everyone wanted to know, when are we getting it? How are we getting it? And how can we put our best foot forward to make it happen? And so it's, even the Historical Society, which their mission is to protect the historic buildings, sees the value in having an active and lively and well, peopled place in Bedford Village, because, that they need people who care about it and who want to be there to care for all the historic properties. So, surprisingly, that was the big issue at that meeting. Other comments, questions?
Just a comment from, and Mr. Wayne, myself knowing the hourly rates of these engineers and their senior engineers and their junior engineers, $100,000 should go a long way to Ken. So you can tell him I said that. I'm expecting good things from this $100,000. So again, good luck and let me know if you need anything from me.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And yes, we definitely plan to spend the money wisely.
Thanks.
Great. Do we have a motion to approve?
So,
Jinx.
So moved.
Second.
Anything else? Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next, we have a request to submit a grant application to EFC. And Kevin, you alluded to it, but if you want to explain more.
Certainly.
Since
So
you waited all this time.
EFC has a water infrastructure improvement grant, which is one of the two that we'll be targeting with this project. And it is a 25% grant with a 75% match. Applications are due in the middle of June 15th. And it is my recommendation that the board authorize the Department of Public Works and Supervisor Calvis to move forward with a grant application for $1.872 million, which is 25% of the estimated full project cost of $7.49 million.
I will make a motion to approve.
Second.
Any questions? Discussion? Nope. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good evening.
You as well.
We have a request to adopt a resolution to petition for legislation enabling retroactive tax exemption for Bedford Hills Fire Department for the parcel of property they purchased, former site of Kecho. The fire department is requesting this of our state assembly member and senator to sponsor this legislation. And I would like to propose that we submit a resolution in support of this resolution to our representatives. So I will make that motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And under old business, we have, just to continue the discussion regarding amendments to the noise ordinance, chapter 83 regarding gas powered leaf blowers. We have, I believe, if he's still here, he hung in with us, Chris Soy. This request originally, but also has been repeated by others, came from our Parks Department, and our Superintendent of Recreation Parks is still here. Thank you for waiting to speak to this. Hi, Chris.
Hello, good evening. So I would like to, in terms of providing input on the consideration and the continued conversation around the leaf blower and noise ordinance. I would like to thank the town supervisor and the town board for considering and continuing to reach out and be open to hearing our department's feedback on managing over the past 2 years the leaf blower ban. So we have been giving it within our department great consideration and marking impacts to our department over the course of the past couple of years with the existing cleanup periods that exist. So our department assessment is that the time frame for the fall use currently for 2024 from November 7th to November 21st would be insufficient to allow our park staff to properly maintain and manage all our properties in the manner that we feel is adequate and up to our standards and to the standards that we have been servicing the town of Bedford residents that enjoy our parks, our greenways, our outside properties, our bike paths, and our cemeteries. The Parks Department has been purchasing and testing electric and battery powered equipment for over 8 years. Our crew has been accepting of the technology, and we have been adding it to our daily maintenance task, and we look forward to discovering additional ways to replace our gas powered equipment with electric. We now have in use electric powered large area lawn mowers, walk behind mowers, grass trimmers, power pruners, and backpack handheld blowers. All of these have proven to the ability to fully replace some of our counterpart gas equipment, with the exception of the electric backpack blowers. Even though they are very useful in most applications, at this time they do not replace a gas power blower when it comes to leaf litter management in the fall. Our leaf litter maintenance practices have always been purposeful and have been evolving throughout the years with all the numerous acres we maintain, which includes large turf areas, planting beds, and hardscapes. We have always maintained the goal of managing our leaf litter in the fall with the intention it will limit time needed the following year in the spring to finish the task. The approach to our cleanups is not only for aesthetics, but also to address hazards, such as keeping our drainage areas open, clearing leaf litter off of playing surfaces that the public regularly and frequently utilize, as well as our ball fields, our playgrounds, and our walkways and bike paths. We also manage cemeteries, which continue to be active and continue to accept the new burials and visitors on a regular basis. Some of these cemeteries are located in the middle of wooded areas, making leaf litter buildup immense. And if leaf litter is not properly managed, can make locating plaques difficult, as well as impact the condition of the turf. In addition, all the cemeteries must be in proper condition for family members and to keep clear for visitors, particularly family members of the deceased. All this work will be extremely difficult task to get done before winter settles in if we move forward with the 2 weeks set forth for 2024. So that's, again, we've been appreciative of the town supervisor being listening to our feedback as we continue to kind of try to craft and manage our operations. But we did provide this information and feel we would like a consideration of either maintaining the 2023 cleanup day period, which would be what we are requesting, and to not move forward to the 2 week period of time.
Thank you. And You are mulch mowing in the fall as much as possible on town properties, not blowing all the
Yes,
property.
mulching over the past number of years has become our primary way of managing the leaf litter in the fall. We do large amounts of mulching on all our properties and continue. That has really changed our overall operations, but we still, with the kind of the scope, size of the areas that we manage, and the amount of leaf litter, we still, in order to properly mulch, we need to move these leaves around, and we still find the necessity to use gas power blowers at this time.
And are you finding that so for the rest of the year, pretty much, I guess we have the 2-week window in April, you're able to manage all of the properties without the gas power blowers. It's really just the heavy debris leaf season that you need a longer window.
Yeah, specifically, with our operation, we don't, if we're allowed, if we are provided that opportunity in the fall, and what our practice has been is that the majority of it is managed during that time of year, prior to the winter setting in, and our spring dates, what's currently in the policy and code is sufficient. The spring dates are not overly impactful to our operation, as long as we're able to address it in the fall as we have been.
And you can clean up around the pools with electric equipment and the other places during the off season.
Yes, and that's what we regularly do. It really is the heavy leaf fall at that time of year, and the size of the properties we manage, the locations of the properties we manage. But yes, outside of the fall dates, we utilize exclusively our electric equipment. We certainly recognize that, obviously, as a town department, we want to be completely and totally in line and in compliance with our town policies. So we've been very, very cognizant of that, and we use electric equipment the vast majority of the year. And we just wanted to provide the input that a 2-week window was, at this time, due to our assessment with the current state of the available equipment, would not allow us to complete our operations as we traditionally have.
Thank you. We also heard that the 2-week window kind of misses the mark on when all the leaves are falling. That some fall prior to that, and some fall after that. So that was also an argument made that the window should be a little longer.
Yeah, I think whether it's also the climate and things falling a little later in the season as well, but that 2-week, we're definitely extending leaf cleanup operations into early December.
Okay. So we had a proposal on the table to extend the dates per the Parks Department's request from October 15th to December 15th. And then it was also mentioned that we could move them back in April to a 2-week window. We had April 15th to 30th. We would request April 7th to 21st. Any comments or questions or other, information?
I have a question.
Yes, please.
So, and I know it varies, the leaf fall from, autumn to autumn or year to year rather. So, do we feel, because we've heard from, some of our local experts that October 15th is kind of a peak, leaf season. The leaves are very much still on the trees within our community by and large. And so my question is, do we think that we need to kind of maybe not go back to what we had in 2023, but rather, but definitely widen the window, right? So I'm wondering if, I've heard of other ranges being floated, and I just I would love to hear your perspective, Chris, of, November 15th to December 15th, or even November 1st to December 15th. and whether we think it's imperative to lift the ban starting in mid-October, if that's just the beginning of, the peak fall season. We don't really see heavy leaf fall until at least early November, right? So I'm wondering if you feel strongly about opening that window within kind of the second half of October.
So we feel that last year, the 2023 window allowed us to adequately address all the needs. If there was, it is more important in terms of the second half of that window to really allows us to do the cleanup and removal and mulching that we need to do prior to the winter sets in. If you don't, then you're going to be picking it up in the spring. So if there was, as you mentioned, mid-October is the beginning of the season. Things are usually drier, a little lighter, a little, not quite as heavy. That would be, potential to be able to be maybe slightly more addressed with our, electric technology. But it definitely would, the second half or that would be, we kind of stake or claim a little bit more to that to allow us to make sure that we address everything after, after all the leaves have fallen, and we can properly remove the leaf litter prior to the winter season. So, there was some wiggle room we're looking for, some movement, it would be towards the front end of that period.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's. Okay, thank you. And I see Commissioner Nguyen is still on. We do a lot of leaf pickup in the neighborhoods, and we try to do it before Halloween. There's usually piles out like farms and some places. I don't know how significant that pickup is, or if we're using any gas powered equipment to do that. I don't think they're actually using gas equipment, but Kevin can. I'm not sure.
We do not use gas leaf blower equipment for that. However, I imagine many of the people that put the leaves out do, and we see leaves out middle to end of October, depending on the weather.
Okay.
The first pickup is in the farms area just before Halloween, and depending on the year, there are significant piles out.
Right. And then the piles are quite large when you come back around in December. They're usually one of the last.
They would be it's a cycle, so they would be the first kind of both times. But yes, the piles are definitely bigger the second time.
Right. Okay.
For most years, anyway.
Okay. And that's usually right before Halloween. That
the first pickup is just
first.
exactly. The first pickup is just before Halloween.
So do we have a proposal from someone to make a motion to, or I guess we can just amend it because we haven't.
The dates for the law.
Right. I heard.
Is there an opportunity for other people to make some comment?
Sure. I just want to see where everyone is, and then we can do that. I heard November 1, or we could do prior to Halloween. Or we could leave it where Parks is proposed.
So I'm open to November 1st, and the furthest I'd be willing to go is November 15th. But I'm also open if anyone feels strongly that the window needs to be expanded to mid-October, and open to that perspective based on. I see you. Are you pulling up evidence? I see you.
Well, yeah. That's what I do. So all I do. I love the fall, so I document when the leaves start falling. So it's from in 2020, it's October 10th, and 2021 is October 13th. I'm seeing piles and piles of leaves, especially in the farms neighborhood across other areas of Bedford, and it tends to be that second, third week of October, that you really need to get that first big cleanup. That's just what I'm seeing. Yeah, I have all the pictures on Dropbox from the last 10 years, whatever it is. So that's just the evidence I'm seeing. So I would be more comfortable with what Chris had kind of requested, just because it's the operations of our municipality and that's what they're requesting. And I'm seeing evidence to support that request. So I'm pretty much kind of on that line.
Are you saying the start to fall in?
No, that's where you need everything. That's the first, you'll see piles of, already out there. Yeah, and the trees, and the trees are starting to really thin out.
I'm sorry, I'm just gonna be a little blunt, could you cite your source or what are you looking at?
My own pictures.
Your own pictures, but I mean.
Yeah.
So
Of
I'm just
all over the
wondering-
neighborhoods,
Right, of all, I'm sorry, what?
all over the neighborhoods.
The neighborhoods.
Yeah.
I think, Tom lives in farms, so.
No, but other areas too.
Yeah, no, and I'm
I
not. like,
actually take like a day off. The one day I take off for myself that I shut my phone off is like the second or third week of October. And I literally drive around taking like fall foliage pictures and the unintended consequences. You see the leaf piles and stuff that are there.
Right, no,
Yeah.
and I'm not.
Yeah. No, I'm just telling you.
Trying to understand like
Yeah.
what is kind of the gold standard evidence-based kind of way to gather, right? And it seems, you know, you have pictures.
Yeah, my
I'm not gonna
eyes, yeah.
debate
Yeah,
with,
yeah.
But I'm wondering if there's a more systematic, you know, way of examining.
Okay, and I heard a bunch of dates going back and
Yeah.
forth, and I had one in my head that Stephanie had mentioned. What was the date, Chris, that you had said that you would like? October
15th.
15th? Okay.
Yeah,
Got it.
yep.
Okay,
The 2023 dates, yeah.
okay, thank you.
And Chris did mention that, you know, when they first fall, they're lighter and fluffier and easier to rake or
Right.
use an electric blower or mulch over. So
Right.
there could be an education that, you know, everyone doesn't need to blow every leaf off their lawn when they first start to fall, but perhaps we could push the date a little bit further into October or early November, and expect that people clean up, you know, using other methods, because that's how they're supposed to be cleaning up, you know, throughout the year if there's, you know, other debris. So we could say, you know, rather than going back to where we were last year, October 22nd or October
It's pretty fair.
25th, something like that. That's very scientific.
You're welcome.
Could I say something?
Sure, we will take questions.
Just wondering if there is a way to carve out town municipal use of gas leaf blowers for that period rather than opening up to the entire community, because we recognize that the town has, you know, a certain area to cover, and it is different from, you know, a landscaper, you know, operating in somebody's backyard. And I mean, surely we can just do a carve out for municipal workers on a trial basis and see how you know, I really don't think two months is necessary, but maybe 6 weeks. And you know, have a carve out for municipal workers.
Thank you. I guess the concern is that landscapers do maintain a lot of different properties, and some of them are quite large. So, you know, and the notion that, you know, we did want to make sure that the town is able to follow our own, you know, our own rules for everyone else was kind of an important point when we first passed this legislation. So I understand that this is not going to achieve, I think, what, you know, the original leaf blower task force wanted, which was everyone should learn how to maintain their leaves differently. But there's still going, you know, we still did carve out the leaf cleanup seasons when there is just a great quantity of leaves, and, you know, people are complaining that the electric equipment just isn't enough to clean them all up. And they do fall over the course of a few weeks. It's not, you know, all at once. So I don't want to take it all the way down to the 2-week window, because I think we've heard enough that people really want more time. But I hear you that 6 weeks might be enough time. Which would be, I mean, we're close, right? Is that what you're saying, Fiona? Or are you saying 6 weeks for municipal operations?
Well, I don't think anyone needs to be cleaning up their backyards at all. I mean, Chris mentioned cleaning beds. Beds shouldn't be cleaned of leaves. The leaves should be left where they are in the beds. I understand that for safety reasons, we need to clean hardscapes and access and driveways and that kind of thing. But I really do think we need, and the town also workers need to acknowledge that or understand that leaving leaves where they fall on 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 Earth is where they should fall, and that's where they should stay. And also, I just want to harken back to earlier in the evening when we were discussing the merits of living in Bedford, and one of the wonderful things of living in Bedford is open space and being outdoors. And if we have to listen to leaf blowers for 2 months in the fall, when Bedford is at its best, I mean, it just really detracts from the best of Bedford. So I really think we need to work hard to shorten that window, maybe go for 6 weeks this year and then aim for 4 weeks next year, because the technology is absolutely there. I have been to expos on landscaping electric equipment, and it's totally there. Whether the town and people are willing to or able to invest in that technology is a different matter, but the technology is certainly there.
Thank you.
I just want to say, we as a department, we continue to research, investigate, trial, this equipment. And I think Fiona knows we've also been very open to alternative means to address some of these. And we will, our ears are open. We continually try to attempt to do that. So, this is not a pushback on it all. It's just, we feel a realistic assessment for ours, and we want to continue to look to improve and look to transition to electric equipment. And again, thanks to the town board, we continue to have funds made available for us to do that and purchase that equipment.
And I hear you completely, Fiona. And this is a compromise clearly, and it's a transition period where we have one of the most aggressive bans in the county. And it provides these cleanup windows as a compromise for people who really want to get all the leaves off in the fall and clean up their yard. And I understand that's not, everyone's goal. But it also is going to take time. And as we've started enforcing this law, hopefully people will start to change their landscaping practices and do things differently, but we're not there yet. And people are still wanting to remove all of the debris from their yards in the fall. And clearly we need to support our municipal operations for safety and other reasons. So this is a compromise. It is not perfect. But the 2 weeks does seem to be too short of a time period to sort of force everyone to learn the new way of doing things. Hopefully will have started doing this year round, other than the 6 weeks or 2 months, whatever we decide to put forward. It is a noise ordinance, so it is not mandating that people leave leaves in their beds, but it is, how can you reduce noise? Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Hi,
Oh, I'm sorry, there's someone here. State your name, please.
Yes, Alex Grodner. So I think I heard Chris talk a little bit about how in future years they would potentially be able to not have this exact same conversation 12 months from now, 24 months from now. But is that dependent on the technology catching up to what their needs are? Because I still wonder, are we going to be having the same conversation in a year if the answer is the technology still hasn't caught up and it's still not, it's not good enough for us to be able to do everything that we need?
I think the goal would be that we will keep improving our techniques and our technology to the point where the Parks Department might come to us and say, sort of as the DPW has done, we're not using electric equipment anymore for this. We're not using gas-powered equipment anymore for this. We figured out how to do it without it. So, and I think that is their goal, and that is in our climate action plan, and that is what we are constantly working towards. So, hopefully we would get to the point where there would be a request to say, at least we would notice that we weren't needing it anymore, and therefore we would
we could move to eliminate the cleanup season altogether for gas powered equipment. But, what we're hearing is we're not there yet. Chris, did you have something else to say?
I was just gonna say that I know DPW has moved, but not to our inventory of lawn and turf equipment is far more extensive. And so, we are, one piece of equipment that's not there yet is our large deck mowers that also mulch with mulching capabilities. Even reps from electric companies that we've been speaking with, that technology is just not there. I think it maxes out at 48 inches of their decks, of their mowing decks. The larger decks that electric, even the industry acknowledges that don't have those machines there with mulching capabilities. So again, we're doing the research, we're getting out there, we're doing the demos. But that's one, our level of grounds and turf and fields are, far more extensive. So that's the kind of equipment that really needs, we kind of needs to catch up for,
DPW uses plenty of gas powered tools, just not the gas powered leaf blowers.
Not for long, no, not for leaf management,
No,
so.
right, not right.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, they are using big trucks to haul those
Yep.
away. So
Yes.
I wasn't comparing the two departments in that way. But thank you. And the mowers aren't required to be electric. We are regulating the leaf blowers. So
Right, but that helps reduce our use of blowers by having mulching,
Mulching.
large scale mulching capabilities.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. And happy to, I think education is a big part of this. We really do want to develop some educational materials that can help landowners and landscapers understand better ways to maintain properties and mulch leaves and leave leaves in beds and things like that. It is not something that, I can do alone. The town board can do alone. We do need help. We need partner organizations and, some of the groups at the county level to help with this. It's, we put out the light board signs. We, would like to make some lawn signs and put flyers around, and the police are passing them out and things like that. But we need a lot more information out so people understand what we're expecting here. Because most people, I don't think quite fully understand what they're supposed to do. They just are trying to do exactly the same type of lawn care and yard care with electric equipment, and that's not really the goal, and it's not really possible. It's that you have to change the practice and kind of use the blowing sparingly if this is going to work. So that's a heavy lift, and we have a lot of work to do. Hopefully we also could create some education for those who get a violation, that we could provide them with a video or with a training or something that would help them comply with the law better. We're not there yet. We're not there yet, but we can work on it. Any other questions or comments?
I just wanted, can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Helene.
Yeah, okay, thank you. My phone has not been cooperating, so thank you. And so many of you know me, I've worked with Fiona and Philippine on the task force, and I just first want to say thank you to the town. I appreciate all the efforts that have been made to move to electric and to minimize the use of machinery all over. And I will tell you, it is quieter, it is more pleasant. I know there are people who still use the gas powered machines, for whatever reason, but I just want to be positive and say what a big impact I think it has had. And I appreciate it. And I appreciate that people are really trying to change. That said, I feel a little bit like we have a change management question in front of us as a town. And, the fact that the technology isn't as powerful as those very strong leaf blowers is that's not a terrible thing. I think we all realize how those are overkill. in every way, in terms of the cleanup. And I guess I want to just make sure that we don't say, well, gee, you know, we can't do it exactly the same way as you've been indicating, Ellen. And so, you know, let's revert back and frankly lose the ground that we all work so hard to gain, to protect the environment and the quality of life here. And so I do understand the rationale and I appreciate the thought and effort that's gone into it, but it's really, it would be very unfortunate for us to say, you know, after, you know, such a short time, you know, we really couldn't change overnight. So, you know, we're gonna open up those windows again. I feel that, you know, I think it may be just a little bit of a missed opportunity not to hang in there and continue to try to change our ways, rather than, you know, sort of accede to like, well, you know, until we can have more powerful equipment, you know, we have to change the dates. I'll just say also, I do completely understand that leaves fall at different times and it's very difficult to pick a date years in advance. But I'm just noticing that, you know, one of the reasons we have warmer weather and longer seasons is because of the very things that we're trying to avoid, which is the impact of all this activity on our environment. And so, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments from the board?
So just to move the conversation along, because I know it's getting late, so, you know, we said October 25th, November 1st, I'm open to either. I just really would like to, you know, are we making a decision tonight? Do we have to?
We
make a
have to
decision?
post a law that we set a public hearing for June 4th at 6, but we need to post what the proposed law is so that we can have
It
a
needs to
hearing on that.
be on your desks at least 10 days, not including some days, so that.
Like
gives us a
tomorrow.
very short window. Tomorrow, with basically by Thursday, I have to send it to you in the final format. And if you change the date again at the public hearing, you need to keep the public hearing open and go through and then have another public hearing on it, because any change in the dates would be considered a substantive change.
Right. So what we would be putting forward for a public hearing, I'm hearing November 1st to December 15th or October 25th, before Halloween or after Halloween.
So I would like to request a compromise. I looked at the 25th of October to the 6th of December is actually a 6-week period.
Yeah, I think
And I was
that's good.
going through week by week. I think it brings us closer to
Mhm.
October. Again, I think of safety, and in the
Yes.
neighborhoods that do have
Mhm.
trick or treating, not just the
Yes.
farms,
Yeah,
but Lakeside, you know, in
Yeah.
Katona. So I feel very strongly of having it before, just so that, you know, Parks has the ability to get everything
Sure.
and no more. But then keeping it tight to December, you know, keeping it tight to December. I know, Chris, you may not agree, but it's a 6-week window, so we'll compromise on the front end, we'll compromise on the back end. I think that's a decent.
And you said the latter
Well,
half is.
and let's remember that we're talking about the gas powered,
Right,
right? It's not that they don't
You
have
can still
leaf
do
blowers.
everything.
You know, it's not that there are no other ways to manage it. We're just trying to create an optimal time frame for them to do the most heavy lifting.
October 25th to December 6th, is that what you
Sorry,
said?
I just want to note that only gives people one weekend if they have children and they want to clean up their yard for Halloween, that gives them 2 days to clean up their yard. And sorry,
With a
not a
gas
Sunday,
powered.
because you can't use the blower on a Sunday.
Right.
So it gives them one day.
No, we have
one
hours
weekend
on
day.
Sundays. We have hours.
Well, it's giving them a weekend, I'm
Right.
just saying,
To use a gas.
to
powered.
use a gas powered blower before Halloween. If we're noting
But it gives
Halloween and
them
safety,
all of that.
it's
time to
only
use
giving
an
them one
electric
weekend.
leaf blower or a rake. I mean, what a fun activity for family. For Halloween.
So it gives Chris the ability to do that big first bulk safety clean. I hear what you're saying now. It only gives a
Yes.
homeowner, you know, with a family, one.
And
one
if you have
chance.
kids, a weekend is not much.
I appreciate that
Yeah,
concern,
I
but it's not that there are no resources available to do the yard work. It's just not necessarily the resources that people want. So.
I'm okay with that.
It's a compromise.
It's a compromise.
Okay, so 6-week period. And I mean, I would only argue that, well, if it has to be before Halloween, I'm not really understanding how Halloween is it safety? You're just blowing off like walkways and driveways, or is it?
It's everything.
Okay. Okay. So October 25th to December 6th, is that?
Is it December 6th or December 15th? I think that's what.
6th is a.
Well, we're talking about only doing 6 weeks.
Window, yeah.
That's my compromise in the back end.
I mean, in my mind, things are a lot heavier and later, so shifting it, because that's when you may actually need the heavy
I
equipment.
think I want to keep it at December 15th. I don't want to belabor this, I'm sorry.
The 15th is a Sunday, if that matters. So-
Well,
Right.
only this year.
The 13th would be that,
Right.
Just
right? The 13th would be a 7th.
It's to give a buffer so that the companies can transition to, resuming the seasonal ban. I just think that buffer is important. I would want to keep it at December 15th.
Chris, can I ask you what your thoughts are, 6th versus 13th? 15?
Well, as you know, as mentioned, later in the season, obviously things are heavier and it's important for us. I mean, we have in our operations, obviously doing a number of other things. If moving it up, I think that would be manageable. If it's just 1 week. My concern on the front end, even though, I said, we can acknowledge that it's a little bit lighter and maybe, not the heavy fall has happened yet. I just do want to note our operations, clearing. I know, again, how much people want to, we have to clear playing surfaces. We have to clear, the parks are still very busy at that earlier part of the year. So losing 2 weeks at the front would be challenging as well. I think if I'm landing on what's being discussed here, I would say a week on either end, a week at the beginning and a week at the end would be something I think would be manageable. I have concerns on both ends, just how it impacts our operations and doing, we're just not clearing a turf area of leaves, but we still have youth sports going on and lessons and programs out there. So a week on either end would be kind of, I think where I would be landing and be comfortable with.
Okay.
But you see, is it worth it to quibble over a week when we're making it difficult for our staff to get their jobs done? I don't know, for 1 week of gas-powered leaf blowing, which I strongly object to, and I don't even own one myself or have anybody using it on my own property. Like, there are people who have large-scale work they need to do. Like, just give them till December 15th to get the job done.
Yeah, that's fine.
Why are we taking our employees and making them scramble when they have, do we want it to be manageable? Or do we want them to be able to do their jobs?
We'll go with 15.
I think we're trying to do both. I think you know that.
Mhm.
And we're
Right,
trying
that's
to
what I'm
figure it
saying,
out.
though. I just
So it's
feel,
not just trying to
I
figure out
just-
the best way. to
yes,
compromise.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. And I just feel
It's
like,
not that we're trying to.
no, of course not. It's just, I'm
And I-
listening to this over and over. I'm
Yeah.
just like, is it manageable?
Well,
We're gonna go
and
back
to
forth with a
some
week?
people, the noise is intolerable.
It
you
is
know,
intolerable.
And they,
It's horrible.
they hear
It's
it and it
horrible,
drives
and
them
I
crazy.
hear it in my neighborhood,
So-
like, I'm so glad to hear Helene say it's getting better, because I'm not sure in my neighborhood that it has
Well,
gotten better.
And that's the response, we have to do better enforcement and we have to get
Yeah.
it, to
I
the point
absolutely
where
get that.
people are actually not using them. So that when we get to this window, a lot of people may choose not to use them because they've not been using them for so long.
Right.
That, this window may not be necessary, and we can do a lot of work on that. But to some people, it is a week
Mhm.
is significant. And, so I think we just have to be thoughtful, clearly, I think it's a good proposal to shave a week off either end.
Mhm.
Have a public hearing on that. If you know, there's tremendous outpouring, you know, and reasoning that, you know, we need to change the dates again, we can. We have till October to make a decision. But
just-
you know, ideally, we would make it sooner than later so we
December.
can do the education.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
just, and I don't want to make the meeting longer, from somebody who lives by commercial establishments, the biggest culprits, unfortunately, and I don't know if the individuals on Zoom agree, are the commercial businesses.
The parking lots.
Yeah, it's the parking lots. It's
Yeah.
like,
Well, we
why
have,
do you want events? And that's just total side point.
right,
don't
and
wanna
that's
get
just
me wrong.
hardscape, right?
So
They should-
somebody who would benefit from a shorter window, not, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
I just want to keep this to what Chris needs, what the town needs, resources and safety. And on just your point, if it means a lot to the businesses and the town to go to the 15th of December, I'm okay.
And just as this process is, you know, we've been providing feedback and we would, you know, do similarly this year if, you know, we would be obviously evaluating, you know, this is, each year has been a new standard. So we'd be able to experience it and then, you know, also report back and, you know, I think maintaining 6 weeks is important. And like I said, it would be something that we would go through and attend to and make whatever, if it did have some negative impacts, we'd look to address it, but then also, you know, obviously report back and provide the board with information on how effective it was.
Okay.
Sure, so I think we can do October 25th to the 15th, but again, to keep the conversation moving forward, the spring, because we have a 2-week window in the spring, and I'm gonna ask a question to the board, not really knowing which side I'm taking. Do we need that still? I'm actually not clear on why, you know, if Chris just said, and I think this is what I heard, that, you know, our workers really kind of set the standard, right? They are town staff. And Chris, did I misunderstand you? Did you say that you don't use gas powered blowers during that 2-week window in the spring?
We have found, you know, in our operations that the cleanup that happens in the fall, if done properly, allows us to be quite limited in the spring in terms of our use of gas powered equipment. You know, there's always some opportunity, you know, there's storms and things that can come up and that would necessitate in the spring. But our biggest concern, if we're able to properly attend to it in the fall and late fall, it would limit, if you know, it limits our use in the spring.
Can I add something?
Please.
Yeah, so we're talking about safety all the time, about, you know, being able to clean it up and have people safely use the hardscapes. I think we really have to remember these engines are not safe to use. They are incredibly unhealthy. So if Bobby says like, oh, what, another week, let's them give the opportunity to do a job. We're actually saying, let them breathe in another week of these carcinogenic fumes. I think this is really important that we need to address this, because with smoking too, we cannot say, we cannot smoke in the schools because it's unhealthy for our kids, but okay, they really want to smoke, so let's allow them 2 weeks, for example. I think we have to realize that these engines are really something that need to go to antiquity, and the sooner the better. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like to propose that we get rid of the spring window and allow October 21st to December 15th. So we have a full week before Halloween, so people could, you know, if it falls
It's very fair.
not on the weekend, to December 15th, and no spring dates, no spring cleanup.
Getting rid of the spring entirely.
Yes, just a
So the
fall.
only period of cleanup here would be October 21 through December 8th.
October 25th.
October 21 to December 15th.
You just said.
21?
You said October.
I said 21 because it gives you a full week before
full week
Halloween.
before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just in case.
Sure.
Well, it gives you a weekend, and then no spring cleanup dates. So it's it's a little bit shorter than this past year by a week. But we get rid of the spring. And that will make it easier for enforcement in the spring, because as they come back out, nip it in the bud, and there's no window to confuse people. Because I think that was confusing. Okay, so that, we set a public hearing already for our next meeting at 6 p.m. And we will try to get the word out that that is happening and take input from the public at that meeting. Do we have any board announcements? Public comments?
I just have
Anyone's
one-
left?
I just have one quick announcement. On June 1st, we're having our 5th annual Pride flag raising, and we have some really interesting speakers. I've secured some youth speakers, and we're having the youth librarian from Tona, so it's going to be very nice, interesting, and we want everybody to show up at the Townhouse on June 1st at 11 a.m.
Thank you. Anything else? Town offices are closed on Monday for Memorial Day. There are Memorial Day parades in each of the hamlets and a barbecue at the American Legion I think at noon, that all are welcome to join. And there being anything else, no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.